First, I'll do some introductions for everybody. With me up here this afternoon is Sheriff Dave Doak, D-O-A-K, the Portage County Sheriff. Seated next to him, to his right, is Deputy Marshal Jeff Irwin of the U.S. Marshal Service. Irwin is I-R-W-I-N. Seated right next to me here is Beth Oswich, O-S-W-I-T-C-H. She is Andrew VonStein's niece and has been designated by the family as their spokesman here this afternoon. My name is Vic Bellucci, the Portage County Prosecutor. First thing I want to do, I'm sorry, didn't spell my own name. V as in Victor, I-G. L-U-I-C-C-I. On behalf of all of us up here and all of the members of Portage County law enforcement, the first thing we want to do is extend to the VonStein family our sincerest and deepest sympathies for their loss. We've certainly met a lot of wonderful people recently because of this investigation in the VonStein family. And seeing what a wonderful family they are has made this all the more difficult. And we are certainly unhappy to have met them under these circumstances, but what a wonderful family it is. And Beth is here to speak on their behalf in just a moment. On September the 20th, this family that I just spoke of lost a husband, a father, a brother, and an uncle, and did so in a very senseless and violent crime. However, because of some outstanding police work here in this community, this crime was solved very quickly, and the murderer, in this case, apprehended very quickly. Outstanding police work involves a lot of things. Good quality, competent help, and also important is cooperation between law enforcement agencies, which is something else that brought this case to a swift conclusion. I want to recognize and extend my appreciation not only to the Sheriff's Department and all of his detectives who worked long, hard hours on this case continuously until we had the defendant in custody. Also the U.S. Marshal Service, who dedicated a lot of man hours and manpower in at least 3 states to apprehend this particular defendant. I want to thank the attorneys, investigators in my office, who also worked alongside with them in chasing down leads and traveling to other states to apprehend this man, and worked long hours preparing search warrants and assisting the officers in any way possible. Also thank the FBI for their assistance in working this crime and putting together the pieces of the puzzle which led us here today. Finally, we must also recognize and thank the citizens, especially those neighbors in that area of Woodway Drive in Twin Lakes. A lot of good citizens came forward and gave the police a lot of good leads. And those leads began this investigation on its journey to a successful conclusion. So anytime citizens become involved and cooperate and help police, we certainly want to recognize and extend our thanks to those citizens also. This investigation really begins back in 2003 with a real estate transaction between the wife of this defendant, her name was Shirley Grigolitis, and a man by the name of Richard Doak. That real estate transaction was brokered by the victim, in this case Andrew VonStein. In 2006, the real estate, which was the subject of that transaction, was named in a foreclosure action by a bank, naming as defendants in that Shirley Grigolitis, the defendant here, as her husband, Robert Grigolaitis, and the Dokes, who sold the property to the Grigolaitises. Ultimately, that foreclosure led to the loss in the sale of that property. And from that point, Mr. Grigolaitis, the defendant here, harbored a deep-seated obsession, I would call it, blaming Andrew VonStein for the loss of the real estate, for the transaction which ultimately fell apart when Doak failed to make payments on the underlying mortgage in that property. This obsession of his obviously festered for a number of months, a number of years, and led him to develop a scheme and a plan to take revenge or to get even with those people that he felt had wronged him financially in this matter. And those people were the broker, Andrew VonStein, and the seller, Richard Doak. The course of the investigation, as you will hear and can talk to the sheriff and his detectives about, revealed that Mr. Grigolaitis had made various contacts with Mr. VonStein and Mr. Doak, and had even made threats to other parties about what he planned to do. His plan, his scheme involved luring Mr. VonStein and Mr. Doak to a location where he could exact his revenge. And he attempted to do that on September 20th. Fortunately for Mr. Richard Doak, he was unsuccessful in getting him to that location. Unfortunately for Mr. VonStein, he fell into the trap and met Mr. Grigolaitis at that home under a pretense of purchasing it. Through the investigation, the Sheriff's Department uncovered numerous records from Mr. VonStein which pointed to Mr. Grigolaitis. As I said before, neighbors made observations about Mr. Grigolaitis' vehicle present at the home on Woodway Avenue. Telephone records were obtained of conversations, or at least attempted conversations, between Mr. Grigolaitis and Andrew VonStein and Richard Doak. Ballistics matched the weapon which killed Mr. VonStein to the weapon which was found on Mr. Grigolaitis when he was arrested. The investigation also revealed that credit cards of Mr. VonStein were utilized by Grigolaitis as he fled the state and was captured in North Carolina, thus proving that a robbery had also occurred. And Mr. Grigolaitis made certain admissions of his conduct by correspondence to his wife, and ultimately to the marshals which arrested him in North Carolina. Having all of this information available to us and presented to my office for prosecution, the process then began in the prosecutor's office of how to handle this case. We had a number of meetings with the family to try to ascertain their wishes. We had a lot of material to go over and a lot of legal considerations to make about what direction to take this prosecution. And ultimately had contact with our county public defender, who was assigned to represent Mr. Grigolaitis. The family felt very strongly that they did not want to go through a number of weeks or months of trial and a number of years of appeal. Should we attempt to indict with specifications which would permit the imposition of the death penalty.